shoring up the middle of the defense, getting the offense back on track. Today, we are fixing the Falcons during their bye week.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code in all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. So if you don't know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Mr. Drew, a.k.a. the iron that sharpens the iron, a.k.a. Mr. a.k.a. And I've been covering the Atlanta Falcons for a lifetime, formerly at FalcFans.com, RIP. Still going strong on this illustrious podcast, and I thank each and every one of you that goes strong with me as everydayers. That means you make this illustrious podcast your first listen each and every day, and all you have to do to become an everydayer, subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So today's episode, I will be joined by Allen Strk, the former co-host of the illustrious Locked On Falcons podcast, a former co-host of the illustrious Falc Fans podcast, RIP, and still a contributor over at the Falcoholic, the SB Nation website for the Atlanta Falcons. And we will be talking about Allen's thoughts on this Broncos game. We'll also be looking at three things that the Falcons can do on both sides of the ball to fix the defense and fix the offense. So without further ado, let's jump into that conversation with Allen Strk right now. Allen, my friend, welcome back to Locked On Falcons.
We picked a tremendous week to reunite. It was written in the stars. I was wondering if you're going to have me back on just because, Darnell Mooney, what a year he's having.
Yeah. I was thinking about that a couple of weeks ago when I turned the page on Darnell Mooney. It was the Cowboys game that allowed me to finally, buy my Darnell Mooney stock back.
I rarely get takes over you, so I'm going to have to hold this one. And as someone who was really a huge advocate for the Matthew Judon trade, I'm going to take that on that one.
Well, I think we're all going to take the L on that one.
Oh, you too? Okay.
I mean, like I had some skepticism with his sack production, and he was at an age where, history says guys can start to fall off, but my stance was, beggars can't be choosers, and this is about as good a move the Falcons could make at that point in the offseason. I was a believer that we would get, whether we got, double-digit sacks or whatever, but I was very confident that we would get at least, like a 50 pressure type of season from Matthew Judon, and we're not getting that. So I'll take that out.
Okay, because I remember you were talking, you preferred Hassan Reddick, so that's why I was
curious. I did. Unfortunately, Hassan Reddick, ruined the Tack McKinley comeback, but
shameful.
But it is nice to have you back, Allen. Maybe we'll get some Darnell Mooney thoughts and Matthew Judon thoughts later in the episode. But let's start off talking about this most recent performance from the Atlanta Falcons. Obviously, not the most illustrious performance when it comes to the Falcons and the Broncos. Sort of for you watching the film, sort of what was your biggest takeaway in this game?
The middle of the field, unless J.C. Bates is in hero mode, attacking the middle of the field when you play the Falcons is guaranteed yardage. Like, it just seemed like anything Denver wanted to do down the seam in the intermediate area or even the run game, it just seemed like there's just acres of space there. And look, we could talk about the injuries all across the defense, but it's just I think it comes back to just some of the personnel decisions, like the idea of playing Richie Grant for extended snaps when you had Natrone Brooks there, who came in and was like one of the three bright spots. I just don't understand the logic of putting Richie Grant in the nickel, albeit in an emergency situation, given that Kevin King got concussed. But between him and the fact that they're still playing Nate Landman 60 snaps, who just you can't trust him to make plays in space at this point. It's just his defense looks slow, and you see teams attacking them in the middle of the field week in and week out. And mastermind Sean Payne was going to exploit that any day of the week. So we kind of knew this was going to be a bit of a mismatch, just given the injuries and Denver being on a surge and how good they were defensively. But it was jarring to see how much a discrepancy was, how Denver's offense showed little to no resistance and just pound away against the Falcons. And Bo Nix looking as confident as ever, throwing in the intermediate to deep areas of the field. So, base takeaway: the middle of the field is just a complete disaster right now, unless J.C. Bates is doing something outstanding.
That's a fair assessment.
But between that and just the same story with the pass rush, just completely non-existent. Like, I understand why they didn't rush more than 4 in the first half, just maybe compensate for the secondary. But I just think week in, week out, and we'll talk more about the Falcons' defense and potential solutions, but they just have no real creative rush plan. Like, it is so lackadaisical. Everything's condensed that you have guys just tripping over each other or just colliding into each other. Like, the twists are so predictable. And Denver's offensive line is one of the top units in the league. And I guess it shouldn't be surprised that the Falcons' defense line got handled, but you just wish they had some sort of plan other than we're going to run a twist with Caden Ellison. That's how we'll get maybe one pressure.
Yeah.
Because do you think the biggest takeaway, it has to be involving the defense? I know, look, the offense only scored 6 points, but the offense had some flashes where they're moving the ball. And unfortunately, in what's been kind of not weekly fashion, but it has been a problem this year, just penalties in the red zone dooming them.
I my biggest takeaway from the game was the offense stinking. Like, I think they had one good drive on the opening drive, and then pretty much did nothing else the rest of the game. And because I don't have these expectations for this defense to be good, obviously I thought the defense would play better than what they did on Sunday. I thought the offensive line did not play particularly well. The issue is, this has been a consistent theme whenever the Falcons have played a good defense this year, that their offense really struggles to move the ball effectively. And they got some upcoming opponents against good defenses. And for me, at least, I never had any expectations that the Falcons would have anything more than really a below average defense this year. And I expected the offense to play much better than this and to sort of be the unit that you could rely on to keep this game more competitive than what it was. And to me, to see them just kind of fall off a cliff after that opening drive, and as you mentioned, some of the things that happened at the end of that opening drive to shoot themselves in the foot, to me was very disheartening. So that to me is kind of where I stand on it.
All valid points, but I will dispute. I thought they played relatively well against the Chiefs. If you want to talk about good defenses.
Okay. I'll be honest with you. I don't really remember the Chiefs game. All I remember is Rashee Rice and Carson Steele cooking us. And that's really all I remember from that game.
The first Falcons Sunday night game in 5 seasons, and you don't remember it.
I'm going to have to go back, and that's one of the things I'm going to work on during the bye week is because I really have no memories of that game other than Rashee Rice screens.
And I think this is probably the most encouraging thing coming out of this game is just the fact that they do have 2 really good litmus tests coming up, and they can rectify the atrocity that took place in Denver.
We'll see. We'll see if they rectify that atrocity, but it will start with fixing the defense, and we'll pick Allen's brain on some of the paths that he thinks we can see this defense make some improvements coming out of the bye week, and we'll get into that as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. Now, if you're a renter like me, it often feels like you're in this endless loop where your money just vanishes into thin air. And I think it's time we end that loop, turn the rent game around, and start earning some serious rewards. That's where Built Rewards comes in. Built is breaking ground as the neighborhood rewards program that hooks you up with points on your rent every month. Pay your rent and watch the Built points roll in. Use the points to jet off on a dream vacation, or put your points toward a flight or hotel stays, or redeem them for future rent payments. They're designed to meet your lifestyle, whatever it is. Earn points by paying rent right now when you go to joinbuilt.com/lockedonnfl. That's joinbilt.com/lockedonnfl. And make sure you use our URL so that they know we sent you at joinbuilt.com/lockedonnfl to start earning your points on your rent payments today. And get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, baby. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app is going to give you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place, so that when you get that hunch in the middle of the game and you can check out the latest stats, you look at the live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just go to FanDuel.com to join today and check out the Thursday night matchup where the Steelers are 3.5-point favorites against the Cleveland Browns, or you can look ahead to week 12 or week 13, whatever, when the Falcons come back, because the line for the Chargers game, the Chargers are currently favored by 1.5. Will that line move in the next week or so? Probably. So make sure you join FanDuel right now, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So here with Allen Strk talking about the Atlanta Falcons and ways that they can fix their defense. I don't know about you, Allen, but it seems like at least the majority of Falcon fans, whether they're in my comments on Twitter or elsewhere, it starts and ends with firing Jimmy Lake as the defensive coordinator. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on Jimmy Lake? And then we can get into maybe some more realistic options for the Falcons to try to salvage this defense over these final 6 games.
The tweets include Sean Khan firing the whole Jacksonville Jaguars coaching staff and Ron Nielsen making a heroic, triumphant comeback.
I don't know.
I've seen a few.
Locked on Jaguars. I'm sure the comments are all full of fire Ryan Nielsen. So maybe the Falcons could make a trade there. I don't know.
Right. I just find Jimmy Lake's defense to be very lackluster. Like they play nickel, 80-90% of the time. I mentioned the pressure schemes. It seems they run the most predictable twists, and maybe it's some because of the personnel, but there's really nothing much creative. It comes to the pressure packages outside of what they do with K&Ls, particularly in the B gap. But between the lack of coverage disguises, linebackers at position, it's not pretty. And I know people will say, yeah, the players got to be accountable, which they do. Like I saw a stat, the Broncos had 199 yards after the catch. That's how bad the tackling was. But it's just, you see all this easy access completions. And I think they're allowing 73% on the season. It's just at some point there has to be some modification. And, there's reason there was concern about how will this defense transition from such a man-heavy defense that Ryan Nielsen played. Although I do believe he played a lot of dime as well, to now Falcons are pretty much just playing primarily cover 3 with a little bit of cover 6. It's been a rough transition. And you look at the defense, and I was like, just the overall roster, and it's like, other than James Smith-Williams and Zach Harrison, who's really improved across the defense? And yes, Jesse Bates still playing All-Pro 11. I think AJ Terrell's still having a strong season, and Mike Hughes has been a pleasant surprise. But you look at across the personnel, it's been decline, regression, not producing. So that's the concern, just the fact that talent isn't being elevated whatsoever. While people want to compare last year, you saw so many contributors rise up to the occasion time and time again for the Falcons last year. And this year, it's just either the key veterans are on a steep decline, or the young players are just not emerging. Like your Arnold Epikettis, your Clark Phillips. It's just when you don't see players progressing, along with the defense getting shredded weekly, you're going to have reason to question the defensive coordinator.
Well, I'll push back a little bit. I feel like Clark Phillips has progressed. Again, I don't think the scheme is necessarily the cause of that, but I feel like he's gotten better at things that he needed to get better at, like run support and whatnot. But
he is tackling better.
Yeah. The Denver game was a rough game for him, and you
didn't think the New Orleans game was rough for him.
There were some moments, but I wouldn't necessarily be like he was bad in that game. But there were some moments where it was like, But I think some of that is owed to just kind of being a small guy. They were able to get Veely and Sutton on him, and it's just like those are matchups that he's just always going to struggle to win. And so, and I feel like Ebiketie has grown as a pass rusher, but when you just look at the sack production, and 6 sacks last year and 1 sack this year, you'll be like, well, he hasn't improved. But I feel like he's a much more effective pass rusher and from a technical standpoint than he was last year. Because last year, to me, a lot of it last year was just kind of the scheme stuff, which is, a lot of stunts and twists and cleanup stuff. And, again, I think that speaks to some of what you're talking about with some of the differences with Ryan Nielsen. And that was something I haven't tracked it in recent weeks, but I know for the first 5 or 6 games, I was keeping an eye on how often when the Falcons do blitz, they get pressure. And it was much better last year than it has been this year. So I think that speaks to what you're talking about.
Yeah, I will say Ebiketie's hand usage, he does look a bit more violent. I do like the way he's using hands, but I just think maybe his limitations when it comes to like a get off. I think that's what kind of holds him back because he's still not generating that much pressure, but it does look good. Like you at least see him active with his hands, which is good. But I guess the team is such in a dire situation that if he's not producing, you kind of have to put on that pedestal of disappointments because it's just defense needs playmakers, and they're not going to get from Matthew Judon at this point.
Yeah. I think at this point in time, like I look at AK as like, if I'm looking at a 4-man rush, if he's my third or fourth guy, like I feel good about that. But right now he's kind of the number one guy, and he's not really capable of being that guy,
When it comes to fixing defense, this probably sounds harsh, but like I feel like a lot of rides on Troy Andersen returning.
Okay.
Just because they just can't have Nate Landman playing 60 snaps. Like I don't know what happened to Nate Landman's agility, but it just seems like week after week he's either taking a bad angle or he's just very slow in terms of just attacking the ball or just getting off of blocks. Like he can't disengage anymore. Just he's good in the box when it comes to just closing out on tackler. I still think tackling is decent, but it's just taking on blocks, making those instinctual plays. It's just not there. And then you ask him to cover 15 yards downfield, something that Ryan Nielsen was able to hide him from last year. He's just total liability. And then you have Caden Ellis, who just does not fit that either. So I think a lot of rides on Troy Andersen. And look, even though he strolled at times, I do think this team missed the Alford on Sunday. And between him and Mike Hughes, I think if those three get back healthy, maybe they can be competent.
Yeah. I think that's all fair, and I don't miss an opportunity to dunk on Nate Landman on this podcast, but I do think the injuries that he had earlier in the season are affecting because he's just not even, like he was never an explosive athlete, but like in short areas, like you would compare what he would do coming downhill or closing, unblocked on a run ball carrier in the hole or whatever to what he's doing this year. And that juice is just not there anymore. And so I do think that has something to do with that. And when you already were, below the mark in terms of what you needed in terms of speed and quickness to probably be an effective player at this level, to lose whatever it is, whether it's 5%, 10%, 20% of that, like makes it to, I think, the point that you have. But yeah, I generally agree with you. It has become a liability.
Last thing I want to ask you is from a schematic standpoint, the Chiefs play a lot of dime because they know their linebackers can't cover. Do you think the Falcons should be playing more dime coming out of the bye week?
I actually talked about this on the most recent episode of Locked On Falcons. I mean, I think that's an option for them, but at the same time, the player that I would ideally want playing dime is DeMarco Hellams. And will he come back this year? I don't know. But like the Falcons' decision not to play Kevin King a bunch of snaps and more than 2 or 3 snaps that they've been playing him this year, the decision not to play Richie Grant at this point, because I feel like Richie Grant's fallen off, and I was the last one on Richie Grant Island, defending Richie Grant.
He couldn't pull a Cale McGarrett for you,
but and so now I'm like, okay, yeah, this island is washed away, like at this point in time. So, I have a hard time seeing what, like, is it Natron Brooks? Like,
or Antonio Hamilton?
Okay, but he can't stay healthy. I mean, he's been healthy for like 2 games this year.
That's true. And then when he was healthy, you got to cover Mike Evans.
Yeah, that was a rough one, and that's burned in everybody's retinas. Although that was another example of why are you asking this guy to play inside when he's probably better suited outside. But
I just thought he could be an option.
That's fair. That's fair. I actually forgot about Antonio Hamilton. I'll be honest with you. I just forgot about him. He's been very forgettable this year, but yeah, maybe that's an option. So I do agree with you that I do think trying to do what Ryan Nielsen did, which is hide Nate Landman by playing a lot of dime in obvious passing situations, is a smart decision. I just don't know if the Falcons, without certain guys being healthy, really have the personnel where I feel like, yeah, they absolutely should be playing Kevin King 17 snaps a game in the dime. I'm just like, ugh, that maybe that works, but like that does not get me excited.
No, not at all. I just think there's got to be an option from just playing nickel all the time because they don't have the personnel. Like Caden Ellis is way better in the box. Use him in pressure packages. I think he's improving against the run after a slow start to the year. But don't have Caden Ellis match up against Alvin Kamara in critical third down situations. Like it's going to end badly. So I think that's the one solution because, look, I have nothing for the pass rush. I think the unit's hopeless. I know it sounds harsh, but it is what it is at this point. And you're going to bank on Jesse Bates having 4 or 5 phenomenal games. Hopefully, Justin Simmons could improve on his tackling because I think he's been a disappointment in that area. I think his positioning's fine, but tackling-wise, it's been pretty sloppy, and that's not what you want. Like that Javonte Williams rushing touchdown, like Bates goes for the punch instead of probably wrapping up, and then Justin hits him. It's just like, go low. Like, you should know Javonte Williams. Like, you do not go high on Javonte Williams. So I think bank on the secondary, maybe play more dime, and then the return of Troy Andersen is probably the best ways I could think the Falcons defense could become competent.
I think that's all fair. We'll see.
This is nice for defensive line. Could you think about anything like is Khalid Kareem going to be 2014 for 3 weeks Jonathan Massaquoi?
Only you would bring up 2014 Jonathan Massaquoi. No, I mean, he's fine. Damon Harris was fine. Like, like they're all basically the same, like it's just like
D'Angelo Malone is not the same.
Okay, that's fair. Lorenzo Carter's not the same either, but
yeah, I don't know why they're playing snaps.
No, I mean, to me, like I basically I gave up on the edge position a while ago. It's basically, it was like until Judon steps up, like there's nothing, it is what it is. And so, maybe he steps up in the second half or after the bye week. But D tackle, Zach Harrison looked good. Brandon Dorlus had like 3 good reps in the game, so that's something to get excited about, I guess.
Ruka Rojo, is he coming off IR soon?
Maybe.
All right. Yeah.
I guess, yeah, sure.
But I think that's, if we have to, 3 bullet points: Troy Andersen getting healthy, the secondary playing at a higher level with Hughes and Alford back, and more dime. I think those are your 3 things I think that are realistic that could change the defense.
Okay. All right. Let's move on. Let's talk about this offense and see, why can't we get more consistent performances against teams like Denver? Going back to what we talked about before, where they've had some issues outside of the Chiefs game against quality defenses this year. And we'll break that down to wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp, and whether you know this month as November or Kirkvember, it's all about gratitude. And someone that often doesn't get thanked enough is ourselves. Sometimes we need to remind ourselves that we are trying our best to make sense of everything in this crazy world, and that isn't easy. The positive coping skills that I've learned in therapy, like me understanding I can only control what I can control, I use every Sunday when I watch the Atlanta Falcons, and also I'm working on myself, and that means I'm trying to be the best version of myself, and I should be thankful to myself for that. And perhaps therapy is going to help you be more thankful for yourself in everyday life. And therapy isn't just for those who have experienced major trauma. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire, and you'll get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp by visiting BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNFL. By visiting BetterHelp.com/LockedOn to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOn. So we just broke down here with Allen Strk how to fix the Falcons defense. We'll see if we can come up with 3 bullet points for the Falcons offense. Allen, obviously the offense doesn't need nearly as much fixing because we've seen this offense play at a high level and for most of the month of October and the beginning of November, play like a top 5, top 10 type of offense. So I guess my question is not how do the Falcons fix the offense, is how do they get that performance week in and week out?
I do think they really need Drew Dalman back. I know Ryan Newsel has performed admirably, but you see it, whether they just can't be as creative on the ground without Dalman. I think Dalman's just a much better athlete, and I think he can handle himself more when it comes to just communication, just maybe running duo at times, but it's just pass protection. It's night and day. Like Newsel struggles to pass off on the most basic twists. Like he is just a liability in pass protection. So I think Drew Dalman could be a big upgrade there and at least provide solidity on the offensive line. Because you saw that Denver game. they're getting pressure wherever. And look, Matthews is going to take his losses. McGarry's going to take his losses. And while I do think Bergeron's made strides this year, he's a bit penalty prone. So there's always going to be some issues with offensive line. But if they could get Dalman back, at least it provides someone that has that experience, but also could make a huge difference in the run game and just keep some sort of level of competency when it comes to pass protection. Like, I'm not thrilled about Dalman as a pass protector, but I think he's able to pick up twists that Newsel just cannot. And then I want to get your take on this. Do you think the fact, because when it comes to just handling pressure, particularly blitzes, I think they're lacking when it comes to quick game. Like, I don't think they have enough like man beaters when it comes to just putting together designs where it's a quick hitch here or something. Like, unless it's Drake London in the slot, running like a shake route or doing something underneath, I feel like they have no options when it comes to just those quick passes, whether it's in short area of the field, intermediate. Like, I know Ray McLeod has his moments on third down, but I just think more times than not, they're not doing enough when it comes to just the short game and getting the ball out quick.
I think it's a fair statement. I'll be honest with you, I never really thought about it until you said it, and now I'm sitting here going like, yeah, that feels like an issue. That does feel like an issue. As you said that, like, I'm sitting here thinking, and I'm like, yeah, that has been something that I haven't really noticed really at all this season. So I think that is a fair criticism when it comes to not necessarily having that sort of quick game. I'm curious, do you feel that's all related to, the lack of play action and the Kirk Cousins mobility stuff? Or is that just, Zach Robinson just loves his deep outs to Darnell Mooney and his skinny posts and option routes to Drake London and, dagger concepts to Ray McLeod, and he just loves certain concepts and all that stuff?
No, I think you're spot on. I think it is greatly influenced. Similar to the defensive line, like, I'm not going to talk about Cousins' athletic limitations. Like, the organization made a decision to assign him knowing this. What he has now, it is what it is, even though it's staggering at times. Like, he can't even like slide his feet. Like, there's just times where I could use a pure statue in the pocket, even though the pocket is collapsing. It's just like, you can't shift left, you can't slide right every now and then. But look, that's what he is at this point. So when it comes to fixing Falcons offense, I don't think it's productive to talk about Kirk Cousins because he is what he is at this point. So yeah, I think play action definitely would help more. Maybe they could do a little bit more max protect. I feel like they just use Kyle Pitts too much when it comes to chipping, when it's like, maybe you have a fullback, but whether it's Charlie Warner or Bijan Robinson, whoever it may be, and maybe just have, or even use an extra offensive line. Because you watch the Bills, I think they lead the league in most plays with 6 offensive linemen. And there's times like they'll hit Dawson Knox on a deep corner or Khalil Shear on a dig route. Like, they're getting chunk plays while having 6 in protection. So who knows? Maybe put Kyle Hinton or whoever it may be to be that 6th offensive lineman, because I think they're asking Kyle Pitts to chip too much, and it's affecting his ability to be dynamic. And part of, I think, fixing out Falcons offense is they needed, I know it seems like always a conundrum, incorporate Kyle Pitts more often, but you saw that Bucs game, both, but particularly the second one. Like, Kyle Pitts still possesses some serious game-breaking ability. I thought both those touchdowns against Tampa Bay were phenomenal. And it's very unfortunate that they didn't use that game as like a platform, because I think since that game, other than that crazy catch down the outside numbers on the left side where Cousins basically threw a YOLO ball, Kyle Pitts has been told not factored to pass the game. So if you want to mention something else, I think the Falcons need, and maybe this could apply more to making better usage of the short game. I just think Kyle Pitts needs to do more than just chip and run like short routes or run just go routes like that. I think they need to be more creative with his usage.
I agree. That was basically what I said every week back in September, when that was a talking point, and then obviously with the performance that he had in October, it became less of a talking point, but it's now again more of a talking point at this point in time, because he has been pretty quiet. And I agree with you, but again, I don't want to make this sound like I'm being like Zach Robinson's the problem, but he loves his 11 personnel. And so it does feel like, what you're talking about would require him. And again, this is the bye week, so I guess this is the time where it is a little bit more realistic that the Falcons will make some adjustments. but he just seems to want to live exclusively out of 11 personnel. I don't know what the numbers were last week, but I just know for most of the season, it's like 97%, 98% 11 personnel since that week 1 game. And so like some of the things that you're talking about, like, don't really work with, some of the max protect and some of these other things with Kyle Pitts and whatnot. If that's how they want to live. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts on that? Do you feel like they need to diversify it, throw in some more 12, do some, I've advocated for more 21 with Tyler Algier on the field and then have him in the backfield to block so that you can utilize Bijan's skills more as a wide receiver and create some of those mismatches against some linebackers and whatnot.
I love the idea, but I know you don't remember the Chiefs game, but do you remember what happened when Tyler Algier was the lead blocker on a 4th down?
I do. But, I believe in Tyler Algier. That
I do too. He's grown. It was just a better.
Yes, it was. I'm not asking him to be a fullback. That's what I will stop the line there. But I'm just saying in some of the passing concepts, have him in the backfield so you can still have your 6-man protections.
I am surprised they don't play more 12 because Troy Warner has been such an impact signing. Like, he's made a real difference in the run game. I love when they put him in motion to be a lead blocker and he just hits that beat gap. So I think that would be a great idea. There are times where they'll spread it out. They'll do 4 wide. And I don't know if it really results in a lot, but it's just they have the playmakers to dissect teams. But I think ultimately just do they trust the offensive line? Because I do think this is a good offensive line, but there are just moments in pass protection where it's just like, oh, Caleb Gary's going to be on the edge or Matthew Bergeron's just he didn't have a strong enough punch and now he's getting pushed right into Cousins' lap. So it's these moments because like Jake Matthews, I think this is actually one of Jake Matthews' better seasons. Like he goes through long stretches where he's just stellar in pass protection, like kind of like those Saints games. And then the 4th quarter, he allows a sack to Chase Young at the worst time, which I know it hurts your brand in particular.
It does.
It just I don't know if they're going to have more trust offense line, but if they don't, which it kind of looks like the way they're asking Pitts to chip so much, then that's why I mentioned utilizing a little bit more max protect and diversifying the personnel because it's just this team's not the Rams. Like I know they want to kind of be like the Rams, but they don't have the firepower to be the Rams just yet. They don't have the quarterback. I think the playmakers are nearing that level, although not quite. But I just run those Rams teams. It's just they're more dynamic.
Okay, that's fair. I feel like Kirk could be Jared Goff. Maybe not Matt Stafford, but I feel like once he gets his legs under him next year, he can be Jared Goff.
I think they need him to be Matthew Stafford, though, for this team to seriously contend. So I wasn't thinking about Jared Goff. I was thinking about Matthew Stafford.
Okay, that's fine. Look, I just need the team to make the playoffs. That's all. They can get blown out by the Packers, 38-3 in the playoffs. I'm not going to care. So
that's what.
I just want to do a post game for a playoff game. That's all I want. I haven't done that since we started this podcast 8 years ago. So that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I guess that's the goal. It's playoffs and whatever happens. But let's do the 3 bullet points. I think it's a good way to set the tone for the listeners. Like personnel diversification.
Okay.
More Kyle Pitts usage. Or just more creative Kyle Pitts. I don't even think it has to be more. Like if you only gets 5 targets, it's not ideal. But if you could make like 3 impact plays, I think that could go a long way. Because that Bucs game, it was just pretty much 2 huge catches, and then you call it a 3rd and 4. So I think just find ways that Kyle Pitts could make an impact. Because I think teams are starting to recognize that Kirk Cousins is just glued into Drake London too often, and now you see them shifting their coverages to take away Drake London and Cousins still throwing those tight windows that don't exist, and you see interceptions like the one that took place against the Broncos.
Yeah. I know exactly what play you were talking about. Yeah. That was rough.
As Bijan Robinson just chilling in the flat. But all right, so personnel diversification, more Kyle Pitts, and what's the 3rd one? Oh, Drew Dalman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, would you agree Drew Dalman would be a substantial upgrade over Ryan Newsome?
Yes. I agree with you. I think Newsome has done an admirable job for these 8 weeks that he's been the starter. But last week, I'm done with Ryan Newsome after the bad snapping, getting losing too many reps to DJ Jones at the point of attack. I'm welcome back for Drew Dalman. Like even with Drew Dalman probably still doing the bad snapping, although I don't think he's had one so far this year, if I'm not mistaken. at least you'll get the improved run blocking and pass protection in addition to the bad snapping. So I can better deal with the bad snapping that Drew Dalman normally does if I can get the positive blocking stuff that we're not getting from Newsel.
Because I'm glad we found 3 things. Because look, I've been thrilled with the offense. I didn't think the Denver game was as bad, maybe just because I had such low expectations for that game that I just thought it was a bad matchup. But I'm glad we found 3 things because look, this offense, while they have been scoring pretty consistently, this team is 6-5, so there has to be some room for improvement.
Yeah,
it's not like they're the Bengals right now.
It's not like they're the Bengals right now. Yeah, that's words to live by. So, Alan, appreciate you joining me on today's episode, breaking down some of these things, having this conversation. Giving the listeners some extra clarity, and I'm sure they're tired of hearing me say the same things on the podcast. But if they want to get more insight from you, what are some of the things you're working on during this bye week? What are some of the things? What are some of the places they can find your stuff?
I will be writing about the defense and how much they've regressed, so that conversation will continue into a long form piece. I'll be doing a post bye roundtable, which you will be a part of. At least I hope so.
Okay.
There's the open invite. We'll do like a post bye roundtable with a bunch of people. So besides that, we got to take it week by week. Like even though bye week opens the creative mind, I feel like we also kind of got to rehabilitate. It's a long season. So even though you want to kind of put together these long form ideas, it's just you got to take some time away because it's a grind. And hopefully this team will be playing in mid-January. So, but those are 2 pieces of work that I will be working on. And I'm not going to say the player, but I have a big interview happening in early December. And I will announce it when that interview is finished. So be on the lookout for that.
Okay. Wow. I hope it's not Nate Landman because he might do some things to you after he hears this podcast.
Usually, I'm pretty diplomatic with the players. I don't try to be too critical of players, but look, when someone's a liability, you kind of got to point them out. I feel like Richie Grant would be the one. Desmond Southward went after you. I feel like Richie Grant.
Oh, Desmond Southward. Oh man, good times.
We're up to 2 obscure names. We had to hit the 2 threshold. Which
I did not think I was going to get multiple 2014 references on this podcast, but it is you, Alan. So of course.
I mean, watching the current Falcons defense reminds you a lot of 2014.
Yeah, it's fair. It's fair. Where's I'm trying to think of some random player from 2014. Where's Yalwyn Smallwood when you need him?
I was gonna say Marquise Spurl.
Yeah. Where's I don't know.
Don't say Paul Slowly.
I was solely. I popped in my head.
Yeah.
And Tyson Jackson popped in my head, and I was just like, you know what, we've
I remember I was at a post-game show. I was wondering if you could make a comparison with Rucorojo and Rashid Hageman. They're just like, please don't do that. And I'm like, all right, I'll stop. Raw 2nd-round picks, but I feel like they're completely different players.
Sure. I don't know if okay, sure. Yes. There's some overlap there.
I'm giving you some content ideas right there.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. I was sitting there thinking because, like, I might have made a Rashid Hageman comp in the episode I did on Rucorojo back in May. So,
we're just bumming out the listeners anymore. I thought on a positive note, and I will keep reiterating this for the upcoming 2 games. The Falcons have 2 huge litmus tests coming up, and it will show if this team can actually be a credible playoff team or they're a total product of how bad the NFC South is. So I think we will get clarity over those 2 games. Like, they still have opportunity to revive themselves. So there's the positivity.
We will see. But Alan, my friend, I appreciate you joining me on today's episode, and we will certainly be. I'm sure we'll be speaking again, and we'll probably have you on the podcast at some point. Maybe when Natron Brooks becomes the full-time starter opposite AJ Terrell. So
let's do it. Thank you as always, my man.